Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today's FPCJ briefer is Mr. Masanori Miyahara, Deputy Director General of the Fisheries Agency. He will talk about radioactivity and the safety of fishery products. And before we listen to what Mr. Miyahara has to say, as usually, please turn your cell phones to a silent mode. Okay. If you are ready, Mr. Miyahara.
Konnichiwa. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your coming today. And this is a great opportunity for us to have briefing meeting for the foreign press people. And we had a similar type of the briefing meeting 2 years ago, shortly after the great earthquake occurred. But since then, we accumulated the data, and we'd like to explain the outcomes of our survey and monitoring activities today. Okay, let's start. We are going to explain basically 4 points. Influence of the contaminated water from Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station, and general explanation on the nature of the strontium and tritium contamination, and monitoring of the radioactive cesiums on fishery products and its results, and safety of fishery products from Fukushima fishing ground. That is the last point. Okay, then first, probably you are already aware of the result of the Tokyo Power Company's research activities on the seawater contamination of the nuclear active substance, radioactive substances. And this is a result, essence of the result of the survey. And most important point is no significant influence of the contaminated water has been detected outside the port. This is a graph showing the level of the contaminated radioactive substances outside of the port. This is the entrance of the port. This is the area within the port. Again, just immediately out of the port area, same thing. Almost no detection of the radioactive substances in the seawater, whereas you see the significant level of the contamination in the port area. And in addition to that monitoring results of the seawater contamination, TEPCO set a fence and a net at the port entrance here. Because the fish exist within the area, we are afraid that fish inside may go out from the port area. Then that fish may be mixed up with the fish outside. That's why the net was set at the entrance. And in addition to this description, the fishing is occurring in the port in cooperation with fishermen, because we'd like to empty the port water. I mean, we want to fish all the fish within the port area, so that no contaminated fish will not go out from the port area. Currently, that fishing activities is going on. And as of the end of the October, no, I'm sorry, yes, October, yes, end of the October, 2700 fish were caught already. And I hope we can wipe out fish in this area as soon as possible. Then I'd like to explain the strontium and tritium contamination. It's a little bit difficult for the layman, but let me try. But the conversion factor, I mean, big relative C belt of effective doses of strontium 90 is about 2.2 times. That is higher than cesium 137. But important point is most of the strontium taken in the organism is excreted immediately. That is the concentration factor of strontium 90 in marine aquatic organisms were lower than that of the cesiums. And those characteristics is shown in this table. But then tritium is involved in the water itself. So the impact from tritium is considered to be small. And conversion factor of the effective dose of the tritium is almost 1/700th of that of the cesium 137. And tritium is like water, promptly excreted from the human body. Standard doses does not include the effect of tritium. Okay. Then strontium. See, the important point I would like to explain is, you see, when we established the standard 100 becquerel per kilogram, we were considered and take due account of the effect from the other radioactive substances, such as strontium. In the Codex standards, when we set up 1 milli sievert standards, see, 90% of the contamination level is from food. And within that food standards, just 12% are assumed to be from radioactive substances other than cesium. But as far as the fishery products are concerned, we considered more influence of the radioactive substances other than cesium in setting up the standards. Effective dose from other nuclear substances such as strontium is assumed to be the same as that from cesium. That means 50% was assumed when we are setting up the fish standard for radioactive substance contamination. But you see, food as a whole, just 12% was assumed. In other words, for fishery products, more conservative assumption was applied in setting up the standard. But on the other hand, in actual monitoring of the strontium contamination, the level of the strontium contamination is 500th to 1 50/50th of that of the radioactive cesium. That means when the contamination level is lower than 100 becquerel per kilogram for radioactive cesium, then you don't have to worry about strontium, because we already take due account of the other substances contamination when we setting up the fishery products standards. That is the point we'd like to make here. Then let's move on to the monitoring of the radioactive cesium of the fishery products. At first we had a monitoring plan development, and we meet frequently to setting up a monitoring area, target species, and frequency. And the monitoring method was reviewed periodically among the concerned parties, and mainly local government is playing a key role in this monitoring activities. Then, as a result of monitoring, if we find any fish or fish product exceeding 100 becquerel per kilogram contamination level, catch is suspended immediately and distribution is restricted. It's ordered to be stopped. But of course, if that level is less than 100 becquerel per kilogram, the ordinary marketing and supply will continue. But even in that case, if we find the contamination level close to 100 becquerel per kilogram, then we check the contamination level more closely, and again, for that fish products, to ensure the contamination level of the fish product to be distributed be lower than, well lower than 100 becquerel per kilogram standards. So that is general situation of the monitoring situation. Then this is how we are doing the gauging the level. The government research institute or semi-governmental institutes are receiving the samples from various ports for various species. Then we gauge the size of fish and weight of fish, and of course species of fish. Then for each sample, we mince the edible part in a sample container. Because you see, what we are concerned about is the contamination level of the edible part of the fish, not the part just to be thrown away. So we just minced up the edible part of the fish, then that part will be checked in a detecting device. This is a detecting device that the sample, each sample is kept in this detecting device for several hours, right? 3 to 6 hours, right? 30 minutes in actual. Then we gauge the actual level of the contamination. And if you are interested in these research activities, we are happy to invite you to the tour, field tour. And the tour will be held on December 3rd, 10th, 11th, and that announced to be made later. But transportation is free, maybe free lunch, I don't know, but we would like to invite you, if you like, to the research institute which is conducting the detecting and research on the radioactive substance contamination in fish. Okay. Then monitoring results, probably most important parts of today's briefing. General trend is a decreasing trend. This is the result of the monitoring for the samples collected in Fukushima Prefecture. This is Fukushima Prefecture samples only. Then, shortly after the earthquake and nuclear power plant accident, that is a period March to June 2011, more than half, 53% of the samples exceeded the standard level, that is 100 becquerel per kilogram. But it decreased to half by the end of the 2012. Then, from the second quarter of 2012, monitoring has been focusing on the species that have recorded more than 50 becquerel kilogram. In other words, we are concentrating our monitoring effort on the more probable fish, contaminated fish, as a result of the accumulated data. So you see, one can expect that in that case, the XX ratio would be higher than the random sampling. But even though the XX ratio is showing decreasing trend, and currently, that is as of October of 2013, just 1.7% of samples exceeds the standard level, that is 100 becquerel per kilogram. And I explained later, but still, over the course of the Fukushima Prefecture, all of fishing activities are suspended except for trial fishing. Okay. Then let's look at the other areas. Now you see, excess ratio is very small, and just 0.6% in October 2013. But please remember, the samples include the species under distribution restriction order. That means the sampling includes the species prohibited to be sold. So you see, even in this case, the contamination rate, detection rate of the contaminated fish in the samples is very low. That's what we wanted to say from this thing. Then monitoring for strontium. As I mentioned, we were taking into account the contamination of the other radioactive substances than cerium in setting up the standards, but we also checked the actual strontium contamination level. Even though it takes a long time and difficulties to conduct the check of the strontium contamination level. It takes more than 1 month usually, but anyway. But then since April 2011, 43 samples were checked, inspected. Then 37 out of 43 samples were below the detection limit, not the standard limit, detection limit. We cannot detect the contamination of strontium in our inspection method. That means lower than 0.011 becquerel per kilogram to 0.4 becquerel per kilogram level. Then maximum value detected was 1.2 becquerel per kilogram. So in other words, the strontium contamination in actual monitoring data are showing much lower level than cesium. That's what we wanted to say from this slide. Then, last point, Fukushima Prefecture products. After the Great Great East Japan earthquake, distribution suspension was imposed. That means no fishing of the coast of Fukushima since then. Then prefectural government of Fukushima has been conducting monitoring for 150 samples every week. And in addition to that, mandatory prohibition was imposed for 41 marine species as of now. But under the current situation where we confirm the decreasing trend of the contamination level, we allowed the limited number of fishermen to conduct the trial fishery for the species which is not under the distribution restriction, and concentration level of cesium is continuously well lower than 100 becquerel kilogram. This is the way to conduct the trial fishery. Fishing area is also identified, restricted for each fishing activities. And that is, you see, we keep the distance from the accident area, of course. And we also selected this area as a result of our monitoring activities. You see, that means, you see, in these areas, the fish to be caught didn't have the record, don't have the record of the exceeding the standard level. So you see, area and species are selected and limited to ensure the safety of foods. And then you see maximum value of the checking of the caught fish is 3.6 becquerel per kilogram, much lower than the 100 becquerel per kilogram safety standard level. And of course, all the fish caught every day checked, inspected, I should say, at the landing site. When it goes to the processors, after processing, we inspect again, inspect the contamination level again. So you see, in case of the processed product, we inspect twice. Then those inspection or monitoring results are publicized in on the website of Fukushima Prefecture. Okay. Then very unfortunately, we experienced the incident of the water leakage from the nuclear plant of Fukushima. Then Fukushima Prefecture immediately checked the level of CDM contamination, and total beta ray in water samples. And of course, that the data is compared with the data from the before the leakage. Then Fukushima Prefecture government also checked, continued the monitoring of the fish products, then confirmed the declining trend of the cesium contamination, radioactive cesium contamination. After that confirmation, trial fishing was resumed. But please note, you see, the fishing activities was suspended since September 1st, but before September 1st, July, August is a closed season for trawling fishery, so almost no fishing activities were conducted during summer. But after summer, in September, almost all fishing activities are reopened. But Fukushima Prefecture suspended that reopening of the fishing activities since September 1st. Then they confirmed seawater contamination level and as well as the contamination level of the seafood. Then they are satisfied with they are sure about the safety of the fish product. Then they allowed the trial fishery from September 25th. Now monitoring is still continuing, but of course already 2.5 years has passed, and the fishermen are so frustrated and in a very difficult situation, and the community is in the danger of the breaking. So you see, now fishermen really want to increase their fishing activities, but on the other hand, they understand they have to be very careful to reopen and increase the species and the fishing activities of theirs. So the Japanese Fisheries Agency and prefectures and Fishery Institute, Research Institute are working together with the fishermen for their safe reopening of fishing activities. It takes time and it takes pain, but we are continuing our effort. Thank you very much. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Miyahara. And now we will receive questions from the press people. And would you please raise your hand and wait for a microphone, then give us your name and affiliation before you ask your question with the microphone. Okay? Dr. Pint.
Thank you. Thank you for the permission to speak. My name is Vivek Pinto. I'm a research fellow at Sophia University and a freelance journalist. I have a two-part question, Miyahara-san. Thank you for your presentation. One, on page 1 of your handout, it says at the bottom, prepared by Fisheries Agency based on information from TEPCO. TEPCO's credibility is at an all-time low, as I said here, when the IAEA delegation came. It has no credibility with the Japanese people or the international community. How can you accept TEPCO data as a basis for your information here, which is very optimistic? That's my first question. And the second part of the question is, it is the nature of your job, this is nothing personal, to be optimistic. If you're so optimistic, why is it that Taiwan and South Korea and possibly other maritime nations are going to ban or have banned fishery products from Japan? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Pinto. And we share your frustration because it's the only this restricted area. TEPCO, only TEPCO can conduct water sampling. But for the analysis, I think government research institutes are involved. But we understand the perception of distrust for the TEPCO. And that is something, you see, we feel like, I shouldn't say this, but you see, I feel the same kind of frustration too. But on the other hand, our research boards are conducting the water sampling offshore, not in this closed area. But in those areas, water contamination is nothing. And that area is a fishing ground. So we are pretty sure water is fine in a fishing ground. Then Taiwan, I don't think Taiwan is causing any problem, but Korea and probably Russia and still have the strict restriction over the Japanese fish product from certain areas. And you see, this is the difficult issue, I know. And again, you see, we have been trying our best since the Fukushima incident, very hard to explain the situation with data. So you see, what we can do is just continuation of monitoring and even enhancing the level of monitoring, then showing the data. Plus, in addition to that, you see, issue cannot be solved by just scientific basis only, because this is related to the public perception. That is why our agency is trying hard to improve the perception, public perception in the foreign markets, particularly neighboring countries. And in case of Korea, we understand not only Japanese products, but also Korean fish products are suffering from that perception. Then consumption level of the fish products decreased recently after that leakage incident. And so you see, we intensified our effort to improve our public relationship with those people, Korea, Chinese, Taiwanese, and Russia, hopefully. And I myself visited China last week and had a briefing session with the Chinese buyers and Chinese media people too. And but you see, with that kind of effort, I think we can change the perception. It takes time. It takes effort. We know. Very, very unfortunately, we didn't cause the incident. We didn't cause the contamination, but it is our job to explain the situation to the foreign market. Thank you.
Okay, next question. Mr. Chandra, please.
Joël Lejean, RTL France, thank you for your presentation. If you could speak a bit louder, I would like it, because I'm trying to record you. It's difficult to have sound. Sorry for that. Two small questions. First one is, could you just, as a clarification, remind us exactly what are the dangerous levels? I think it depends on what. Uranium is 1 kilo, what is it, 1 becquerel per kilo, and plutonium is different. If you could just remind us the maximum tolerated for consumption. And the second question, have you at any moment conducted your test, I mean, with other organizations, I mean, or individual or independent observers or something like that? Or is it just based on your own statistics, calculations, and witnessing of the sample? Thank you.
I don't know whether I'm answering your question correctly, but you see, the 100 becquerel per kilogram is the relatively low standards, particularly if you look at the other international standards. 500 becquerel per kilogram for Codex. Codex is higher, right? 1,000. And but to ensure the safety of the seafood and to enhance the confidence of the public on the safety of the fish product, our government decided to lower the standard level from 500 to 100. 2012, right? Early 2012. And some of our fish, very honestly, some of our fishermen are not happy with that reduction of standard. But you see, we persuaded them, we have to accept that standard to recover the demand for the Japanese fish products. And it was not easy process, but now I think 100 becquerel per kilogram is already accepted widely among the producers. Then I cannot understand the second question. Could you repeat that again, please?
You conducted your test independently, or have you done it with other organizations in Japan or international, IAEA or others? How can we assess that the value of your test is accurate or is not just some sort of maybe error made sometime? Error is human. I mean, you can make mistakes. And we've seen in that catastrophe that there were many human mistakes made here. As the Parliament report stated itself with Dr. Kurokawa. So what is the guarantee that what you're doing is absolutely correct? And why didn't you take some other people to watch this situation and examine and eventually send data to other countries to verify and monitor? And if you did it, could you tell us with whom?
Okay. Gauging and monitoring of the contamination level is conducted by government research institute or semi-government research institute. And that inspection is conducted by the experts, not fishermen at all. And plus IAEA visited last week, okay, but this week, from last week and this week, and they said yes. What they said? Endo-san observed, yeah. And of course, all the results and methods through the review by the experts, international experts, and because it's data and the methods are public, and so we are pretty confident about the reliability of the monitoring data. And number of samples are huge now already. And then you see, in the actual distribution system and markets, and distributors like Eon or other major distributors are doing their own monitoring. And almost none was detected, the case of the excess contamination level for the last 3 years. That way we see, and so I think only one case or two cases. And but you see, that is a proof that this system is working well, I think. And in case of the exporting products, again, all products are subject to inspection. For the foreign markets, I don't think you see any incident will occur. I mean, excess contaminated fish.
Sorry, I can't hear. Can you speak louder?
I mean, you see, in case of the exporting products, see almost all major markets requiring inspection before the export. In particular, China and EU, so on. So you see, for the exporting products, I think safety is more ensured by the double or triple inspections.
Okay, next question, please.
Go ahead.
I'd like to compliment that basically the responsibility of the inspection belongs to the country, but we would like to explain and to give you opportunity to show you that we are doing a very scientific based and very transparent inspection. That's why we are now planning to host the opportunity for the visit tour to the actual inspection site. So it's really welcome for us for you to take a look and convey what kind of the inspection we are doing to the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
Okay, journalist.
I'm Michi Yoshida with Singapore's Channel News Asia. I was wondering if you've done monitoring of radiation level and fish products outside of Japan and how that measurement compares to fish around Japan, because if the radiation level is compatible, then perhaps that will be a way to convince other countries that Japanese fish is not so dangerous after all.
We don't have data of the contamination level of the other area fish, unfortunately, but maybe we can find out that from the academic.
I think we can provide you that we'll be doing a research previous to the earthquake. We have a data from 1974 to 2010. So even at that level, that we detect a slide from that 0.01 to 1 becquerel per kilogram. So the radionuclide exists even in the normal situation. So we can compare the before the earthquake and after that.
Next question.
My name is Seon-Lee from Yonhap News Agency. You said that you have checked all the products. Does it mean every single fish? Does it mean you check every single fish? And second one, there has been a news report that Japan will bring the issue of fish fanning by Korea to WTO, and I think Japanese government has not made clear positioning about those issues. So what are you gonna do about that? Okay.
What I don't I don't understand fully what you mean by every single fish, but let me try. You see, we are conducting monitoring of all the major species, and in addition to that, you see, we of course try to conduct the check of the all the fish when the landing. That means, of course, yes, sampling, and no, but sampling is focused on the fish which is supposed to be higher contamination. But on the other hand, you see, we have been trying other methods too, but it's not so successful yet. For example, in case of rice, some type of detector is used by use of the conveyor. So you see the rice goes through that detector, then almost all products will be checked easily. But on the other hand, the fish is different from that kind of the products. Fish differs by species, shape, and part of the part to eat is differ. And just checking the surface of the fish is not enough, because usually we eat inside of fish. So far, we haven't succeeded in finding any better method to check all the products yet. We have been trying, but so far, I think it is the best way to inspect the minced products, minced part of edible part of fish. That is the best way to ensure the reliable data. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions from the foreign press?
WTO. WTO issue. We reported this incident to WTO, and we haven't decided any.
The SPS committee in WTO, and we brought this issue as a specific trade concern, and there was a discussion also between the Republic of Korea, and the Republic of Korea replies that we will continue discussion on it, and they will provide us additional questions. So that situation is that we are waiting for the additional question by the government of the Republic of Korea.
I mean, not SPS committee, but
Just a moment. Use the microphone.
I didn't mean the SPS committee. I meant that you're gonna take these issues to WTO. You're gonna file it to WTO. I mean, the regular WTO lawsuit or something like that.
No decision yet. We haven't chose that route yet. Okay, but please remember, you see, at the same time, we understand. You see, as I mentioned before, perception issue exists. So we try our best to improve the perception of Korean consumers. So we'd like to, you see, use any opportunity. For example, seafood show in Korea, we will participate in that, and we received TV crew from Korea to explain the situation to those media, Korean media. But so please remember, we will make that effort too. Okay.
Okay, next question from the foreign press. Okay, if there is no more question, we'd like to close the session now. Thank you very much. And there will be another briefing in Japanese.
Oh, please.
Okay, with the permission of the briefer,
Yeah,
please.
Go ahead.
Very special opportunity.
Thank you very much for the very special opportunity. My name is Annette Hansen, and I'm from the Norwegian Embassy. And my question is kind of related to what you answered just now. But so the Norwegian Embassy in Korea, through the Norwegian Seafood Council, has received numerous questions about seafood safety in Korea following the recent news about renewed spills of contaminated water into the ocean. And most of these questions and interviews seem to indicate that the Korean journalists don't know anything about the initiatives in place in Japan concerning seafood safety. And so what kind of communication programs are in place to import in important export markets for Japanese seafood, such as, for instance, South Korea, ensuring that authorities and consumers alike are aware of the initiatives that Japan has put in place to ensure that the seafood is indeed safe?
I think probably I explained our intention clearly, but you see, we will use every available opportunity to improve the perception of the Japanese food in not only Korean market but also other foreign markets too. And so one example is participation of the seafood show or exhibition, like Norwegian government is doing very actively in participating in those kind of seafood exhibition. And plus, you see, we will try to talk with media as much as possible to explain the situation and the result of our effort, so that, you see, perception will be improved. But it takes time, I know. Thank you.
Now, may I close the session now? Thank you very much, Mr. Miyahara.